Hey folks, welcome to episode 12 of Beneath the Grandstand. Thank you for welcoming us into your ears, maybe into your eyes if you're watching us on flowtrack.com. But we really appreciate you giving us this moment of time. A lot of things happening in the world, and we want to continue the conversations that we had last week. And bring how the social conversation is affecting sports and the people that we care about. And I think there's been more and more direct actions that we've seen coming to light that leagues and teams can kind of plant a flag and do something very sometimes symbolic, but sometimes super actionable to remove racism and address those people who might be poisoning the water and in a position of power who are negatively reflecting sports and cultures that people are building up.
Yeah. And, we want to remind you as we go through these conversations, we love for you to subscribe, listen in each week. So definitely do that and give us a review and let us know what you think of, especially these current weeks, and any guests that you'd love to see help us push these topics forward. But Alex, right along the lines with what you're talking about, huge news out of the CrossFit space in the sport of CrossFit this past week, where the founder and CEO of CrossFit, Greg Glassman, made comments on Twitter around the events of George Floyd and his murder, and just very insensitive comments that were taken very not favorably within the community, and people were very upset. There was also a letter he sent to an affiliate gym that circulated with some really uncomfortable messaging that he sent to these people that are spending money to be affiliated with his brand. And really it furthered into a recording of a conference call that he had and comments he made around the George Floyd events. And so what's come of all this is that the community has spoken, and people are acting. They're not only voicing, but they're putting words into action. Athletes are pulling out of the CrossFit Games, the biggest event in the sport. Sponsors are pulling out of the CrossFit Games, and the CrossFit, the actual brand, Reebok being one of them, has been a partner for 10 years. Events that are associated and affiliated with CrossFit have announced they are no longer being affiliated with them. And gyms, which are the gyms you see around your neighborhood, the local CrossFit gyms, are standing up and saying, we're not going to be affiliated with CrossFit anymore. We'll be our own brand. We just will not stand to be associated with views of that. And so I think it's just a very strong example of this is far from over. And this is not something that's just happening a couple weeks ago and we're moving on and going on with our lives. Communities are standing up and they're speaking louder than they ever have before, and things are happening because of that. And so, we felt it was important to continue this conversation this week. We're excited about the guest that we have on. He's an athlete in the sport of track and field that we have known for years. He's also an athlete that grew up in Minneapolis, where a lot of this has started and originated over the last couple of weeks, and only really a mile within where the death of George Floyd took place. So we're really excited to welcome onto the show this week, Mr. Hassan Mead. Welcome to the show, Hassan. It's great to have you. And, before we get into the topics today, I know, we're kind of still in quarantine around the country and around the world. What's the strenuous training of a distance runner like today for you out in Flagstaff?
Well, today you guys caught me on a pretty low-key day. This week being a 3-session week, Fridays is kind of an easy day. If I need to take a day off, take a day off. If not, kind of, do a little some activation also. So instead of going for a walk, I had a tee time this morning at 7:20, so I went in down and played 18 holes. So yeah, I had to make sure I got it done in time to come back and I had a time for you to link up with you boys. So yeah, today so far no running, but I'm planning to get a little jogging later, but setting up for tomorrow. So
Is there a track and field golf champion out in Flagstaff? Does anyone hold that title?
No, actually. Not that I know of, man. As much as I play, I have yet to run into other athletes, like, or maybe track and field. I run into a lot of different occupations, but no, I haven't ran into any athletes yet, which is kind of a surprising.
So I guess it's a self-proclaimed title that you have.
I'm holding the title right now.
Well,
7,000 feet, man. Come see me, yeah.
we'll have to find some challenges for you, but it's great to see you and great to have you on. I know it's been it's been a crazy few months for everyone, and I really curious to hear how things are going for you and your family. Obviously, you have ties to Minnesota where a lot's happening right now. So I guess maybe let's start there. How have you been with the recent events with George Floyd, and how is your family holding up in Minneapolis?
That was one of the first things that I did when the situation kicked off, was to call in my parents and my sister and my cousin that's up there. And I mean, I know they're not gonna go out there and do anything reckless, but at the same time, once I heard where it took place, I was like, man, I know that exact location and how it related to where my folks live. So I called in to check up on them, and to to see how they're doing. And they said they were doing well. Besides, all the groceries nearby was kind of a demolished. So, when they want to do shopping, they kind of got to go around the city and go to different areas. But besides that, they said we were all right, and I just told them to kind of stay down and keep their head down. But long story short, they're healthy and well, man. Appreciate you asking.
Well, it's good to hear. Good to hear. And could you, for the listeners, could you maybe give a little background and context to where you're from, and in Minneapolis, and how close these events took place from where you are?
Yeah. So, well, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is just about, if you ever been to Minneapolis, is Minneapolis and St. Paul, the two main cities. I'm from I grew up towards the southeast of Minneapolis, towards the Minneapolis area, right before St. Paul. And I went to South High School, which is, I would, from my house to South High School, and where the young man died, it's in between there. So it's about a mile from where I live, about 2-3 miles from where my high school is. So it's an area that I'm very, very familiar with. And it's a neighborhood that you used to just walk through, and whether it's you going to the grocery store, or you going to your buddy's house. So it's an area that I'm very familiar with. And so, yeah.
What was it like seeing, just watching the news and seeing that an area that you're so familiar with in the national spotlight in the way that it was with the murder?
It was kind of shocking, because I remember a few years ago watching the LA riot, and watching the documentary that get released, and people talking about how, like, describing certain areas, and that's how that was their neighborhood that was getting, like, that was on fire. And so what I was seeing on TV, it was kind of like that in the flashback, but in the present, it was like I'm seeing what I saw in a documentary about 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, happening in the blocks or miles from where I'm from. So it was kind of surreal in a way. You're just like, nah, that can't be, because you don't really expect stuff like that. It's kind of a low, like a middle class, lower economy kind of stuff. So it's like you don't see anything like that kicking in. People kind of know each other by names and so on, but you never know, man. When something is so heated up and it explodes, it's up, I guess, anywhere is possible. So I never thought something like that would happen in South Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Hassan, it seems like this was the incident with George Floyd. The murder of George Floyd was a spark.
Yeah.
A spark on top of something that maybe had already been smoldering. And I'm just curious, what was your experience with police growing up in South Minneapolis? Can you recall any specific incidents where you felt unsafe or felt like you were being targeted specifically?
The only times I can, because remember, growing up in South Minneapolis, and coming from a family that didn't own transportation, our number one transportation was public transportation, right? So if I'm coming from curricular activities late in the evening, whether it's winter or summer, my way to get home was take the bus, take the light rail. So sometimes when you were, when you're in the light rail, which is kind of the train station, you got checked on more than the other because they see a black teen wearing, if not all black, a lot of hoodies, just kind of covering themselves up, and then it kind of looks, the stereotype of like you look suspicious. So the first thing they ask you is like, "Where's your fare?" So you constantly got checked on a lot more than the other people that were in the train with me. So yeah, I think you can say that's profiling or targeting. But as a young teen, I remember that was the constant thing that would happen was, and mainly not in the bus, but in the train. You get on, or right when you're about to get off, they'd be like, "What's your fare?" So that was the most I remember. But when I got to college and I was able to, I used to drive, got access to a vehicle and start driving. Then I started to interact with the law enforcement and police a lot more. And at this point, I would have been living on the north side of campus. So you kind of like it's like getting, you kind of in the campus, but you leave campus, and then as soon as you enter the neighborhoods, you constantly, depends on what hour it was, you always have to be careful when you were driving, or slow down, and because you just didn't want to get pulled over for any reason, because it's just never comfortable when cops pull you over. It's all, there's this like there's this like instant response of like something bad has to be happening, like what, like you broke the law or something when you get pulled over. So I just remember constantly being kind of always aware when I start driving around, especially when I was by myself or when I was with black people. But when you're with like some of your white friends, I felt like you can take a deep breath, and you kind of had almost like I got a little bodyguard in a way, But
Hassan, it almost sounds like that police their guard was down once they affirmed that you were a college student. It's like you're on, if they see you with a U of M sweatshirt, you must not
yeah,
be a threat. And I guess
exactly.
how difficult is it is it to judge those moments and to I don't know, work through that, and it's in your hometown too. I mean, that's probably just a couple miles separated from you thinking that the police are your protectors from seeing the police as targeting you.
It it's just like I remember constantly just being like, even if I didn't do anything wrong and I got pulled over, it was always like I would have to be the bigger man or the bigger person, just because I never wanted to put myself in a situation where they can, hypothetically, or like create or have any reason to come out with any scenario or jump on any scenario and trying to, you know, do any harm. So I always trying to, even when you weren't like, even if you jaywalking, you crossing the street, whatever it was, I always try. And that's something strange when you're trying to be the bigger person and someone who's supposed to protect and serve. You know what I mean? That kind of the mentality that it did, as a young kid and as a young black kid. And you were always aware. I think that just kind of if that makes sense.
Listening to kind of the story of just even driving in a car by yourself or driving in a car with your white friends, and how those scenarios were different for you, and that almost like a breath of, like you let out a deep breath or whatever it was. Could you maybe just like take a step back for us and just help us understand, what is it like from what you've experienced in your life? What is it like to be a black man in America? And how have you seen that different from someone who's not a person of color?
I think there's two type of being black in America. There's I feel like there's two different ways to look at it. At least for me, or in my perspective, if you're first view would be, if we take for example me coming off of South Minneapolis, growing up in South Minneapolis, right, where it's like either very low financially income white folks or majority of black people living in that area of South Minneapolis. So you look kind of looking at like, lower end kind of towards poverty. So if you see that kid constantly and that kid never like interacts and explores or learns and kind of generates a certain like people skill. So if I never left South Minneapolis and I just stayed there and grew up, then I would probably be twice to 5 times so-called threatening to the public than what I end up being, which is like Hassan Mead, who played every sports he can, had a lot of white friends, Hispanic friends, just like kind of had multiple cultures surrounding him, which meant that if I went to somewhere, I wasn't by myself. I was with people of different, middle class, from like different areas. So it was hard to just say like, oh, we're just gonna pick on you, because I kind of was like, you can say diversified. We were to look at a profile in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the two different. So if you're coming from just a kid, like grow up, never left their neighborhood, then that's hard for being a black kid in America, because you are constantly not only being targeted, but you're being stereotyped, you're being profiled, because the way you dress, the way you walk, the way you when you listen to your music, everything that you do about you, it's not the so typical called what is it to be American, which is like if you're not dressed a certain way, if you're not talking a certain way, then which is I think the idea of like how if you don't dress like a 17-year-old white boy when you're a 17-year-old black kid, then you're threatened. So that is the danger of being a black kid coming from old black neighborhood, the threat that America sees. But if you get out and you have this multiple culture experience, then you are less threatened in a way, because they must think you must not be that bad because you have white friends, or you can talk a certain way you weren't expected to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those are my two different views of like what it's a feel like to be young black African American in America.
So having kind of that diverse group of friends that you might have been surrounded by in high school,
Yeah.
you kind of made a comment of like, you might have come off different than someone else they would expect coming from South Minneapolis. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
what do you can you go into what you mean by that and what that was like?
Absolutely. So when I play basketball in the winter, the way when I'm going from basketball games, or when we walk into basketball games, the type of vibes we got, how we got looked at, was absolutely 180-degree different compared to when I ran cross country. When I ran cross country, I wasn't threatened. I was this like lanky, tall kid who was good at running. I was everybody's. Like everybody was so friendly walking up to you. But once I was playing basketball, it was like kind of like this, from the hood. That's just like suspicious. People did not feel as comfortable coming up to you as when you were doing another sport. So for me, those were the things you see that as they change, and it's just like people are identifying sports with certain behavior or certain like, if you play this sports, you must not be good in a way, as in a good person. So those were some of the stuff I remember me and my friends seeing it, and so yeah, man, it was it is strange, man.
Hassan, you bring a unique perspective to the racial justice discussion, because not only are you a black man in America, but you come from a family of immigrants. Your parents
Yes.
immigrated from Somalia. You were born in Somalia.
Yep.
Was there an additional layer of challenges that you faced because of that background, or maybe any actions or challenges that your parents faced because they were from Somalia?
Oh, not me personally, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. But absolutely, the people, the community, the Somali community, always raises certain. So you got this stereotyping towards black people, right? Whether you're from Uganda, you from it doesn't matter. So the a general idea of like African, right? And then you break that down into when you live certain areas. So if you're from Somalia and you live in this community of where like you got people from Somalia, Ethiopia, like Kenya, just a different region of Africa. Within that, then now you break it down more. So I remember like when I got back after living in the West Coast for a while and came back to Minneapolis and being in prime, probably one of the most largest population of Somali people living there. I came across a lot of African Americans, as in African Americans in America, did not like the Somalians for whatever reason. And it was kind of like, so you got to not only about black people, or people of color. The people of color now are broken down into a language you spoke, the culture. So I remember that, and it was kind of a shocking to me. I'm like, man, my own people of color are kind of like not looking out after each other. It was just like, nah, man. It's like, I remember I have a black friends in African Americans group, and then I had a Somalian friends, and I remember they did not get along because for whatever reason. So that was the first time I ever saw that, and I was like, man. And I'm kind of caught up in the middle because I just spent 8 years in the West Coast where I never seen a Somali person in a while. But I'm also I'm born and raised in Somalia, so I'm like deep in the culture. So when I came back, and I was like, well, what's causing this friction? And I think it was just like, maybe the city, the territory, living there. So that was something that was new to me when I came back from California to Minneapolis in about '05. But
were you able to, I mean, having that kind of experience of seeing both sides and being away from the Somali culture for a little while? I mean, obviously you were with your family, so you were never totally away from it. But when you got back to Minneapolis and saw that divide,
yeah,
were you able to, I mean, were you within at least your friend group, were you able to help bridge that gap at all?
yeah. I mean, there was never like a giant clash of that, and I never had to get in the middle. But absolutely, like me, then when my African Americans realized that I'm being Somalian, you know what I'm saying, and also like having to have a great relationship with them, I felt like they kind of took a deep breath and realized, okay, maybe we're kind of jumping the gun on some things, and maybe we should so I would say kind of mellow down, and you start to see a lot of friends that we usually might not interact. We're starting to build a certain relationship. But absolutely, yeah, that was probably one of the weirdest experience for me, seeing Somali community not get along with my African American community, and I was just kind of like, what?
Hassan, I'd love to ask you about, we're making all these connections here with Minneapolis and the running culture. You you have to be linked in some way, or at least have a connection with Mayor Fry, who we had on the pod a couple weeks ago, before the major incidents went down.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with Mayor Fry, and how do you feel about how he's approached the recent weeks and addressing the issues in the community?
I met Adam. I met him a while back after, I think, the summer games. And I think he was trying to give me the key to the city, and I wasn't able to get back. So we met back in then, and him coming from also a running background, it was easy to get along. So I remember, so I wouldn't say we were like close friends, but when I saw things was going down in Minneapolis, and the last time I spoke to him was, well, he talked about the difficulty of, there was a young kid. I remember it was maybe 5 or 7 year old kid that got shot up in North Minneapolis 2 years ago, and the community was having a difficult, and he was in the community trying to deal with that. So last time we saw face to face, we were over at North area. We kind of talked about that, and I know he's been doing his thing, but when this came up, before he unfolded everything, I just sent him a text saying that, I can't imagine being in his shoe right now, um, because of how upset the community is, and there is not a one solution to everything. So I just sent him my my thoughts, and that I was, if he ever needed anything, or we were here as a friend, and just if he needs to reach out, or for whatever reason, because I mean that's my community as well. So but I always trying to keep an eye on him and what he's up to. But and I saw the recent community reaction on when when his response was not pleasing to the public on defunding the police. So um, for someone who's got such a passion on being having a great relationship with the community, and then the community react that way, and they had every right to react that way. It was a it was kind of a not easy to watch.
Do you have family or friends or cousins or buddies back in Minneapolis that see Mayor Fry, like demonize Mayor Fry, or see Mayor Fry as the problem?
I have not had that conversation with anyone that reach out to me and they say that to express that feeling. No one so far.
Hassan, one of the things that we hope to do with these conversations is just make it known, kind of the experiences of Black men and women in America and what they have experienced, and so you've talked a bunch about obviously what it was like in Minneapolis for you, kind of experience with police and things for friends and family. Are there anything else that you experienced as a kid? Or as an adult, just where racism in America, whether blatant or whether you thought it was someone that didn't even know they were doing it,
Yeah.
and examples of that we can help shed light to that are happening today.
Yeah, few of them like coming to mind, and I think most of these are kind of like when I was in college. Besides besides the incident at the train station where I felt like as being a young African American, you always getting targeted because they thought you were taking a shortcut or for whatever reason. Um, but no, I remember one time. I think this got to be like between 2008 2009, just after my freshman year, and I was with a couple of my friends that was it was about, I want to say about more than four of us. I was the only black kid, and we went up to the Mounds View, which is kind of like a northeast or northwest of Minneapolis, and it's this really it's the suburbs. I would probably say dominantly um, Caucasians. I went up there with my buddy, and we went out there because some of my roommates were from that area, and we went up there to go get dinner at this restaurant. I don't remember the specific restaurant, and we got out of the car. My buddy Sean was driving the car. It was my roommate. He got out the car, and I was kind of one of the last ones to get out the car. And for some reason, I was about probably like 5 to 10 feet behind him, and we're about to go in the restaurant, and a lady comes out of the restaurant, and three of my friends are walking up there. I'm about maybe 10, 15 feet behind them. Um, and she walks by me, looks at me, and then like takes a second look at me, like she couldn't believe what she was looking at. And she was just like, huh? She's like, we don't get your kind often in this area, and she was like, and like Sean and them look at me, and I was like, what did she just said? And so she was like, she just kept walking, and it was kind of like it took me a minute to realize what she really said. And I'm like, we're like 20 miles from the heart of Minneapolis, and lady just comes out the restaurant. She just goes like, huh, we don't see your kind often around here. And Sean, I just look at my boys. I was just like, it was kind of like you heard it, but you really didn't know. So I just kind of shook my head. I was like, you heard what she said? And we just went in, but that whole night at the restaurant we were eating, like that's all we talked about. And I just like, I can't believe like I just experienced that in 2008, 2009, whatever it was. So, and I don't know if I ever went back into those area by myself, but that was one of the first, like I remember because I wrote about it on Facebook on my experience that night. And this is before Twitter and Instagram and all that. So I remember like, because this is when you were like put up when you experienced something. It's like Facebook was like where you kept up what was going on. So
Yeah.
I remember wrote that on Facebook, and just like this just happened to me in Mounds View, and and it wasn't making out because I had three white friends that were with me. So that was probably one of the most like I just like, dang, like, you don't think it's gonna happen to you, but like, you just like, we just kind of were like, what? And we kept going. But anyway, it kind of like, it kind of shook you for a while.
Yeah. Can you explain and again, for someone like Alex and I, like we will probably never get that comment, right? And we could be with you and we could hear that being said to you, but like
Yeah.
knowing what that feels like inside, can you explain what are the emotions when, you're just literally minding your business, going to eat with your friends and giving a
Yeah.
comment like that? What are the emotions that kind of, get stirred up inside?
I mean, at that, like, I'm trying to think back, but it did not. It was almost like, man, like, what am I doing here? In a way, you know what I mean? Like, it makes you feel like you were not wanted, um, and I can, you're trying to not to build anger because nothing good is gonna come out of that because you can never win that situation because you know what I mean. It don't matter how innocent you are. So me getting more upset is like kind of by by me getting upset and showing more anger is I feel like what they're maybe expecting, and they're hoping that leads into something else. So for me, I'm not. Well, you thinking about it is like being the bigger person, not give them the satisfaction of like them getting that joy. So it's like it's a tough pill to swallow, but imagine once that happens to you over and over again. At one point, you're just gonna explode. You know what I mean? Like you can only take so much. So, um, it's not easy. So it's hard to say. It's just like it's like somebody constantly bullying you, but there's like not a whole lot you can do because no matter how innocent you are, you can't win the situation. You know what I'm saying? So like it's hard. It's hard to explain it sometimes. I'm getting angry just thinking back at it right now, to be honest with you. And I'm like, that's like 12 years ago plus. Yeah, it's not good.
Hassan, for the guys that you were with,
Yeah,
I wonder, as white guys, or
yeah,
if what was their reaction? Because I can only imagine when I was in college, if somebody said that, I think a defense mechanism for things that you don't understand sometimes is just laughter, especially when you're
no,
a college male. But what I guess,
yeah.
how did they react? And I guess
I I
how
remember.
would you have wished they reacted?
I no. I mean, at that point, remember we're like 19-year-old guys, and at that moment, I remember my buddy Sean who drove. Really good friend of mine. He's from Menominee, Wisconsin, which is a small town, and he was just like, "Did she really say that?" So he was like he was shocked to a certain extent, but now talking about it, I mean, I don't. If the lady would have stuck around and I felt like she would have harassed me more or like say a lot more racial things, I have no question that my friends would have came up there and told the lady that like they would have taken it from me. But I wouldn't say they were shocked, but I don't know to what extent. But I just remember my buddy was like, "Did she really just say that?" So it's like I'm sure, yeah, they were aware that it was wrong what she said, and she was, but it was just like, wow, I can't believe that happened. You know what I mean? Like, but I think if the situation would have gone a lot more, I have no, they for sure would have been there for me. But um, I I don't remember what their state of mind was at that point. Of I can't really answer that what their experience was, but I just remember their reaction, especially my buddy Sean saying like, "Oh, like, wait, man, what is wrong with her?" Like, dang, like you can tell him that kind of stirred him a bit.
Knowing this is kind of like stirring up some feelings. I mean, do you, as you're talking through it now, and you look back at that situation, and I'm sure there's so many situations that other people of color around I say in America, but really around the world experience those quick instances, right? Is there
Yeah.
anything you wish you had done, or is there a way to use that opportunity somehow in a productive way to have a conversation, or is that too Are there too many emotions tied in the moment to be productive, or what do you think?
Man, right now, if I were to go back to that moment, I would have. I don't think I would have had the patience to try to educate that lady. I would have probably um, said a lot more than what I said back then. Yeah, it'd be difficult right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that just because you get older and you just see a lot more, so your tolerance to that kind of just it's been ran out in a way. You know what I mean? So it's tough. So I was young, very hopeful, and I was just like, yeah, I just brushed it off, and we talked about it, but I remember, like I said, getting back after dinner later that night, I wrote about it because I was like, it was still. I felt like I had to let it out, and even though my boys were there and we talked about it, I was like, I had to let it know people that on Facebook that follow me, because I don't want them to like go back there and think that something like that can't happen to them. You know what I mean? So it
Mhm.
was like I was trying to, but yeah, I think maybe I can go back and speak more about it on I don't know what a different platform, but it wasn't a whole lot back then. I mean, like it wasn't like Instagram. I could have record a video, post it, and tell people like, hey, you go there, watch it. This is how it is. But no, it was just I just wrote it like a couple, maybe a paragraph or two, and hopefully people. And I remember a lot of people read it, and there's a lot of support and comments, but I don't remember. I should have probably looked back before we did this, but yeah. But I don't know, man. I probably would have been more pissed off and. Probably would have not gone to the restaurant. I would have, yo, I'm leaving. Y'all want to come with me or
Yeah.
not? I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm like, my money's, I don't, they don't need my money. I don't want to give them my money. So I would have been dipped. But I was like a young kid. I was just like, oh, man, let's go eat. She's, for whatever. It was just kind of like I brushed it off, like, oh, she's crazy or whatever. Just kind of left. But,
Y-
ain't it?
You said we talked a little bit ago, and you said something interesting. You said, and I think we were talking about like advice you would give to somebody. I don't know if you remember what you said, but um, in situations that you encounter, you said something to the effect of like, don't walk away, uh, and tell yourself it's not a big deal.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's what I did back then. Um, but I think that was maturity. I think that was when you're that young, maybe certain things, maybe you don't quite fully understand what just took place.
But yeah, can you go into what you meant by that? Like why, like what you should be telling yourself? Like it sounded like it's okay. It's almost okay to feel the feelings and the frustration and not to ignore it, but how like, because I think the way you described it was almost like that's going to come back later if you don't
Yeah.
at least acknowledge it.
Yeah, I mean, if someone says something or done something that bothered you, whether it was verbally, or it was like non-verbally, right? Um, the only way, hope understanding that person might not be aware of what they're saying, and they think what they're saying is a norm, which it's not, because it's being offensive or hurting someone. Is to correct the person or inform that individual what they're saying, how it's affecting you or those that is being taught. So if someone was, if like, let's say like if I'm going down to the gas station and I get a similar experience that I did 12 years ago, right? I would probably stop and ask that person, do they understand what they just said? Hopefully and willing, the person is willing to have a civil conversation and not constant conflict. So if that's the case, then I'm gonna be like, do you understand how racial, how offensive that is, and this is? And if I can do that, and if that person can say, if they can understand what they said, then maybe that you're preventing from a chain effect. You're stopping it from happening. So that is something that me as of today I would like to do to not only prevent from someone else getting, having that negative experience, but to also educate and help this person experience on what they may not be experienced before. So that is I think what I meant, not when I say don't walk away and hold it all in, but sometimes not every day you're just gonna be like, oh, I'm feeling like I got the energy to explain people. You know what I mean? Sometimes like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't owe nobody to explain nothing, and when someone like say something like that, you just like you lose it, or like you had enough, you fed up with it. So um it's so,
It's kind of two sides. Like you have to know that you're in a good headspace to have that conversation, and you also have to be able to
yeah,
read that that other person is as well.
it's willing to, because you step through, and then it could be a fatal. It could be totally gone south. So yeah, I think you have to very observe the situation, and then be able to see if it's worthy and is it safe to give a feedback or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's like it's not like you can just pop that, like stop on a sidewalk and unravel someone's life, like a person's lifetime of insensitivity and racism. You know, especially when
No,
you're a 19-year-old kid, you know, in college. Like, how could you possibly like start to unravel that
she's a
in
grown
such a
woman. Like
casual conversation? Yeah.
this was like a grown woman. This was not like this was a grown woman. So I'm thinking like, where have you grew? Where were you been in the last 45, 30 some years that you don't understand what you just said? You know what I mean? Like, um, so that's the sad part. It's the it's the lack of someone not knowing what they're saying when they're being offensive.
Hassan, I'd like to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You were talking about how the perceptions of when you played one sport versus another. You know, you were
Yep.
almost seen as a threat when you played basketball, and
Yeah.
then but when you ran cross country, you weren't a threat, and you were people were more open and welcome, or at least white people were.
Bro, they let me hold their kids, man. They're like,
Well,
take a
let's.
picture
I
with
would
my
like to talk
baby.
about. That's so strange. I mean, that in itself is like, I mean, in that moment, somebody hand like, I mean, being a minority in a predominantly white sport, right? Like
Yeah.
distance running, high school distance running in Minnesota,
Yeah.
like predominantly white sport, and you were the top of the class. Everyone was watching you, but you also looked completely different than anyone else. Like, what was that like how were you perceived? And I guess, do you have perspective now on how insane some of those perceptions and the way you were treated was?
I would be honest, and I would say in when I was doing track, I got nothing but love. I think, and I think that's because it's, and you can see this from high school level to professional level and so on. When you are good at something and you're excellent at, you doing at the top of that something, right? Everybody is just gonna look and see like, or see the good side of you, or assume you're good, right? Like I could be out there committing crimes, but if I'm come over here winning tomorrow's race, breaking records, right? And I'm not, no one is gonna like accuse me of that. But so when I was doing track, I got nothing but love. I think I cannot I don't remember a single moment where I felt like um that I experienced any discriminating, racial, or anything like that. But when I played basketball, and I only played basketball my junior year in Minnesota, I can tell you the energy was not the same. And I think that's because you just saw a bunch of young black kids dressed a certain way, playing basketball. One headphones, ear in, the other one hanging out. It was just like, and people found that threatening. But when I was over here wearing a 4-inch shorts, that's not threatened. So I can say when I was doing track, I think it was all love, and I don't know why. I think that's because they must just be think, and I don't know how people program it that way, but that's just their way of functioning. Like somehow someone's told them someone that, oh, if you run track and field, and especially if you're a distance runner, you are the most innocent, safe person, so you're safe. But somehow if you're doing anything that requires a little more athletic, a little more I guess you can stereotype, but more like African American sports, majority of them. But then all of a sudden, oh, you're dangerous. You must be somehow related to this, like thug lifestyle, this unsafe, or like listen to this gangster music. It's just kind of like this ball full of stereotyping, I guess.
What would you say to a kid in high school who might? What would you say to a black athlete in high school who might look down the start line of his local his or her cross country event, and notice that they are
They're,
the one, if
yeah,
not
they're not,
one of the only
yeah, they're
black
not.
people in a sea of white?
It goes back to what I was saying. It comes down to experience. If you've never been experienced with interacting with a lot of white people, it's not gonna be comfortable. I'm serious. Like it's gonna be like it's one of your kind, the way you look, everything. Coming, and then there's a lot of them. So I won't be surprised if that kid is very sheltered. Like just kind of keep it to themselves, not say a whole lot, just because they don't know. They haven't been experienced to that. But what I would probably say is, just do what you came to do. Which if that was to come in there, perform, and then get out of there, okay, do that. But if you perform and then you get the opportunity to be able to interact with people, because that's the beautiful thing about sports, is that even though you might not come from exactly the same neighborhood or have the same native English, sports allow you to, it breaks that wall down. So at the end of the day, when you both tire, there is this like sportsmanship, and that sportsmanship can lead into other conversation, can lead into a friendship, and it can lead different relationships. So for a young African American kid that's doing a cross country, I would say take the opportunity of expanding your knowledge, whether it's sports, the people you come across, and so on. So I would just say have it open minded, but it's easier to say that than to do it. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have 2, 3 other friends that can help you, if you're just by yourself, it's hard to be out there like, oh, I'm just gonna go over there and trying to shake everybody's hand. It's hard because you don't know what these people are gonna say or think about you. So you're kind of like afraid in a way, I guess. And I had that experience when I came to the States back in '98. I mean, I didn't know a lick of English, so I moved to California with my uncle, and I got thrown into a ESL class, which is like in California, English as a secondary. They take you out of English class, put you in there, which is me and a lot of Hispanic kids. So like the teacher speaks Spanish, so it's like how you gonna make friends when you don't even speak either of the language? So you know what I mean? So it's like sports.
Wow.
That's the reason why I was caught up in sports. Was like sports almost didn't require the language. As long as I knew I could figure out how to play, I can play.
Playing
Hassan,
was the communication.
Yeah, it was. Seriously.
I'm curious, like on the flip side of this conversation, it was like you in distance running, in track, you could do no wrong. You said people were giving you their babies to take pictures with, and
Yeah.
these people were embracing you. But I'm on the flip side, your core kind of high school friends and like traditionally who don't see running as a black sport, distance running as a quote unquote black person sport. Like, did they give you a hard time for doing white people sports?
Um, I would say not me, because I was good at it, and I think the fact that I was dominating, I had that swagger, like you know what I'm saying. Like this goes back to that dominant. When you doing something, you're not gonna get picked on because it's like. So I don't remember my boys picking on me for running it, but this could relate to one of the reasons why I started running late. I didn't pick up cross country until I was junior in high school, and that was because I wanted to play basketball, and that's being in the fall and the winter. I was like, I gotta practice and play with my guys, and then by the time I got to my junior, I remember one of my good friend who was 2 classes ahead of me and he was going off to junior college was like, don't wait until your senior year to figure out what you want. And I just knew I was always good at it running, and it can get me to places. I knew I wanted to go to college, and I knew my parents were in no position to pay for college, and I wasn't going to pay for college. So I figured I better put the ball down and start running. So, but they knew the opportunity that running held for me. Like the places that running can take me, they knew that basketball couldn't do it, or them making fun of me was like they didn't want to hold me back. So I never got that from my boys. They were always like, once they knew I was good at it, they were like, yo, you need to do that, because that can take you, you know, it can give you opportunities that we don't have and not that many of us have. You know what I mean?
Hassan, when you're talking about the reception in the sport of cross country and track and field, how it was much different, I'm curious to know if that's carried over for you in as you got to college and now in your professional career. Do you still feel like track and field, athletes are received that way when you're traveling the world and traveling the country? Do you still feel that reception, or is it different now that obviously when you're in high school and you're the best, everyone in the community knows who you are?
Yeah.
How is that as the world gets bigger as a professional athlete?
So let me get. So you're asking,
like, do you still feel like, yeah, do you still feel like that, when you were comparing basketball to track and field in high school, do track and field athletes, your experience, is it still that reception is still strong in a positive light?
Yeah. I mean, so if you put it like this, and I'll be generalizing when I say this. Majority of the track and field in America, right? What would you say the percentages between African American athletes and non-African Americans? So if America sends like 150 athletes, how many is black, would you say? What percentage? 65? More? Right?
More.
Yeah. Yeah, right? So you go away from the sports becomes this way. It gets more like, it moves into the area of becoming majority of all African, African Americans, or somewhat what, not all of them, but majority of them. So, and that still carries the idea that I was talking about earlier with associated with basketball, right? This sports, African American kids, right? So when you see 5, 7 black athletes and 2 mixed or 1 white kid here and there, the perception of like danger is still there for people for some reason. I don't know why, because it's just a group of that look like, dress certain way, walk certain way, somehow brings in this danger, right? So I think in high school it might not be, but the more you move away from that and turn to professional, I would say, yeah, to a certain area, people don't feel safe or perceive safe, I believe.
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So I'll try to kind of paraphrase, and what I'm hearing is essentially, in high school you were one black athlete among many white athletes, and the reception was positive. Now,
because the ability,
you are, yeah, and you stood out and you excelled. Now you're still excelling, but you're now at a level of the sport where the majority of professional athletes at the top of the game are African American athletes. So it's almost like because there are more, like the majority of the athletes are African American, the perception overall is
it changes.
Not as warm.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly.
and when you say that, is this like when you're in a stadium, pick a diamond league, is this when you're in a stadium getting ready to compete and the reception afterwards, or is this when you're with a group of athletes maybe outside and going to eat, or like where would you describe that?
I would say this is scenarios where falls into like between meets. Like, so when you got all day to kill for 2 days out or day out before the meet, and you go out, you've been in the hotel all day, but you want to go for a walk and get a lunch or for whatever, right? So you grab 2 of your buddies and so on, you go for that. That's what I'm talking about. It's when you're outside that performing, because when you're performing, when you're in that stadium, for somehow that danger don't exist no more. You're not dangerous to nobody no more for some reason. But when you're out there and you're in the street and you're not, for some reason, the way you looked at the vibe is different. And maybe it's just me, but that's how I always see it, and it's like, so when you go out and, hey, I'm gonna go to the grocery store 2 blocks down and grab some snack or something. You go for it, and we're not wearing suits or nothing. We're wearing like sports wears, right? But
Yeah.
unless someone realizes that you're gonna compete tomorrow, it's like you're out of place in a way. So somehow people are looking at you weirdly, looking at you seeing differently. Got this, and you can feel it. They don't have to say it, man. You can pick up the gestures, the way they move, everything. You see that, and you just like you feel like a creature in the wrong place or in the wrong area that you're not. It's just like everything doesn't want to touch you in a way.
Yeah. And I
So
mean,
I would say outside the performing stage, yeah.
it's. I mean,
And
it's
this is
very
like,
it's. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, and this is something that I guarantee you, many African American athletes, Black athletes experience it. But it's just something that you've seen so many times that you certainly build this like tolerance to it, that to the point you're just like, man, you're not even worth wasting my energy in a way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's there though. But
It's I mean, it's again, I don't think that I can say I will ever be able to fully understand and experience that. But like when you think about the stark contrast between literally being in a stadium of thousands of people cheering for you,
yeah,
getting done
as
with
soon
a
as you're not
race,
performing anymore, yeah.
leaving and like literally going to dinner an hour later, and the
Exactly.
reception could be completely. I mean, it's yeah, and I think those are the things that people miss and people don't understand and aren't always. And I think you've heard that from athletes and even I think that has been heard with athletes in bigger sports, even, right? Like whether it be NFL or NBA. But I think that's it's just a very strong example of how different life can be in a matter of moments.
Yeah.
And those moments when people are uncomfortable with your presence has to be amplified for you now because they were just celebrating you, right? It's like you were on the track with a flag on your chest. You have USA on your chest, and everyone's celebrating you as this pillar of Americanism, and you know what I mean. And so you live on that high and that end of the spectrum. So the other end of the spectrum, when people are avoiding you, has to feel even worse.
But
that has to be even more amplified.
Yeah, but it's yeah. I mean, it kind of like not to the extent, but like we can think back in on like Colin Kaepernick, right? It was like now everybody wants to like support him, but when it first started, it was like, how dare he? Why is he not performing? Why is he not complaining? Why is he not playing football? It was like you're getting paid. I argue so many people saying that like, why is he doing this? This country made him so much he's getting paid millions of dollars to go play football, to do what he loves, and this and this and this. And it's kind of it's a small taste of that. It's like when you're in there and performing, oh man, you're everything. But as soon as you get out of that performer's uniform and you're out there and you're hanging out with maybe none of your friends that are not athletes or we're not competing, so they see you in a different different scenario or different place or different like vibe. It's like all of a sudden I became someone else, right? It's like and it's weird. And I think most of the time, but people that are a fan of you are not. I'm not saying they're the one, but it's those that are like sports fans, but that don't know you or they're not fan of you, but they're just a fan of your sports. And when they see you out there, they might not recognize you, that you just competed. All they see is that you're someone different, and somehow they think you shouldn't be here. And by you being there, you're bringing danger to their lives. So I'm not saying like my fans who are cheering for me is out there walking across in the street when they see me on one sidewalk. No, it's the generals, the ones that don't know you well, that just put you in the category of like, I fit in this stereotype, this profiling, and I must be dangerous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you bring
That's
up
what I
interesting.
meant.
You bring up an interesting point just about when you're performing versus not performing, and you could probably even you look at Colin Kaepernick and say he kind of exposed it to another level where it's like even if you're performing and you actually voice something you care about,
It's
people
like,
don't want
how
to hear
dare
it,
did you
right?
say that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Why
just
are
like
you
we
not
just want
playing?
you to can you just play, right?
Yeah. Why
And
do you
so
can't just play?
it's like exposed a whole nother layer of it in a way.
Absolutely. So it's like it's somehow like when you were supposed to be doing something, it's like you can't do something else, or how dare you express that something made you uncomfortable? You know what I mean?
No.
And I think that's what this brought up. It's to like, it is not so much of like, it is the deep um conversation, which is these are small, and I guarantee you from now on, you're gonna notice a lot more behavior by talking to a lot of these athletes and being able to like hearing these what we're saying right now, and many other like young athletes and non-athletes of black people are describing. You're gonna be somewhere, Ryan, in Texas, and I guarantee you're gonna see something and you're gonna be like, you would never notice that before. It's almost like when you want to buy a vehicle and you start searching, right? All of a sudden you start to see that vehicle everywhere, right? Somehow it just appears. It's gonna be like that. You're gonna see a lot more because somehow now you're kind of like you're aware of it, or if you're not consciously, you're subconsciously aware of it in a way. So, um, it's we'll revisit this, but it's gonna be different for you boys.
No.
Well, it's good. I mean, I hope we notice it more, and because it'll hold us accountable. And I hope we, yeah, it's front of mind always. And I
Yeah.
think of the common, the rebuttal to people. You see it all the time, and it's the quote, "Stick to sports," right? When an athlete comes forward, it's like not only is that like, I mean, there's so many layers to that phrase. That's like, how dare you not do what I like, just perform, just stick to performing. And like to not, for someone to justify a human to not be able to weigh in on their own
Yeah.
personal feelings and
Yeah.
minimalize them to only being able to contribute to society and contribute to social conversation in a sports sense.
It's like dehuman.
Like,
Yeah, it's like taking your humanity away. It's you're no longer a human anymore. It's like, oh, you don't have those rights anymore. You just go do this one task and no opinion.
right.
I just want to add one thing to what you said, Hassan. Just to the point of like you're going to notice this more, right? And I think what you're saying is us as white men and women are going to notice it
Yes.
more, right? It's
Yes.
and I just want to call out that it's not enough to notice it, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
noticing it is great, but now we have to take it the next step. But what you talked about, right? Like, how do we then take it the next step and have the conversation, right? Because it's probably, if I hear a white person say something racist, it's a lot easier for me probably to call it out and have that conversation. That might be tougher for you because it's emotional, right? And
Because
we
I'm gonna be
have to
called a
not,
racist. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
right? And so it's like we recognizing it is great, but recognizing it and standing up and saying something is where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's and I said the other day when I was talking to the young athletes and they were talking about like, what can we do? What are the steps to do it? And I'm saying, that's what I was saying. Like when you see your teammate or your friend or even someone that's being done wrong, that has nothing to do with you, step into the situation, and because you're in a place to be like, listen, this got nothing to do. I'm not being biased, but what you're saying is absolutely wrong in these so many different levels. So that's the conversation, is that we have to, you know, call out and correct those that are doing this, or the ones that are being done. Help those that need the power.
I want to ask you a question here, just in sticking with our sport. How does track and field get better in this? Right? I mean, we all come from the track and field side of the world.
Yes.
How does our sport help move this conversation and the movement and the education and really the fight against racism and inequality? How does our sport and the leaders in the sport, how do we do that? How do we move it forward? And what are some things that you see?
I mean, we can start from as young as, like this youth camps. When these diamond leagues are having all their and like, press conference 2 days out before the diamond league starts, before the U.S. championship starts. I think it's important that those elite athletes, these world championships, these world finals, to talk to the community about the issues. So to bring it to the young ones, and also and not only to the young ones, but also to the ones that are even the adult ones, to talk about what is happening. So continue this conversation, but also teach the youth, because if you can teach them at a young age, you can really limit, or you can maybe help reduce, like, what I'm saying, kind of like slow it down in a way. So I think they need to put a lot of resources on using these athletes that, for example, the Sports Illustrated just came out with that, with where they had the article talks to all these world championships, African American athletes, right? Put a panel together where, like, and they don't have to be world championship. You just tell their stories and experience about what happened, and that, I think that can help, because that is gonna ignite, that's gonna trigger something that was never done before, which is educate the young ones, and also people that inform or educate people that may not been aware of what they were doing, or people that their community maybe never had experience, to hear from people that experience this way. So instead of saying like, oh, that doesn't happen in my community, how do you know if it doesn't happen in your community? Have someone ever told you about it? Have someone ever expressed it, what happened to them? So I think we gotta stay on it and keep it active. But in track and field, we gotta talk about it more. And I think we gotta talk about it. Every meet we go, there should be the community should be involved. There should be a panel of athletes and community speakers, and that's the one way to go, I think. That's all I can think of right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hassan, before we close things out here, you sent me a text last night, and I just wanted to
Yeah.
give you the opportunity to tell that quick story. You had a run in with a travel situation, but not just because you were a black man, but because you were Somali born. Can you
Yep,
share that
yep.
little anecdote with us?
Yeah. I text Alex last night because I was out, and I was like, it kind of came to me just thinking about some of the, when you asked me to, like, if I ever felt like discriminated, or I felt like being African American and East African ever created difficulties in my life. And one of the stories that came into my mind was back in 2015. I want to say leading up to the Olympics, I believe. It was around February. Myself, Mark Rowland, Andrew Weeding, where we had a trip planned. We were gonna go to New Zealand for 3 weeks, and then a 1 week in Australia, and do a couple races down there, and then come back to Flagstaff. So I was the first one to travel, and we had my agency booked the traveling and everything, and I flew from Eugene to San Francisco to LAX. I'm about to board my international flight from LAX to New Zealand. It's a 15-hour flight, and you have to get this $10. It takes 5 minutes to get a visa, and it wasn't even for New Zealand. It was for Australia. Apparently, Australia requires you to get that temporary. So the guy, grabbed my passport, plug in the computer, everything, and then he, put a birthplace. I was born in Somalia, so he puts a Somalia, and then he's like, it kind of made a weird noise, and it didn't work. So he enters it again, and it doesn't work, and he calls the embassy down in Australia, and they're like, oh, he either holds a passport, or he's born in one of the 7 countries that we ban entering Australia. So you gotta understand, I got an American passport. It just says my birthplace is in Somalia. So this is the issue. So they said that even though have American passport, because I was born in Somalia, I could not get on that plane at this moment, and I needed to go to the nearest embassy and talk to someone. So I'm supposed to get in a flight. I can't get in the flight. The guy just tells me like, "Oh, you just got to get a hotel and then go to the embassy tomorrow, and hopefully they can help you." I go to the embassy. Embassy telling me like, "Oh, we don't deal that no more." Talk to DC. I call DC. Washington DC is like, "Oh, we don't deal with this no more." Call Toronto. I get bounced around for 2 days before a lady told me that I got flagged because I was born in Somalia, and even though I have American passport, I cannot board that plane, and I need to sit. I need to be stay put because I've been flagged and I can't even go anywhere. And they need about 3 to 4 weeks background check before I can travel. So the issue was that Australia flagged certain countries, 7+ countries, and Somalia happened to be one. And it was just like, it doesn't even matter that you were born there and you can left when you were 1 day old. Because of the passport says Somalia on birthplace, and even as American passport, they were denied, and it was just like nope. And it was like something I never heard of before, and I was just like, man, I'm like, fuck, I ain't going back to Australia, and I ain't never going there no more. So that was like the first I ever got like denied of going somewhere because of like somewhere I haven't been for 20 some years. I left in Somalia in 1997. I haven't been back there, and it wasn't like I traveled there and all of a sudden like I'm getting questioned like, oh, what were you doing there? It was like, no, we don't even care what your history is, what your story is. You cannot come into this country until we do a 4-week background check, and somehow you're safe. So that was the issue that I ran into that back in 2015 in February, I believe, somewhere in there. Yeah, I got I didn't one time. Me and we were coming back from Vancouver. We went to Victoria. Me, Charles, Haroon, and we were coming back. And I was ahead of Charles. And we coming back. We took the ferry back from Victoria. We just coming back to Seattle. We driving from Seattle to Eugene. And it's just like your passport. Boom, you're coming in the border, right? And this guy got hold of my passport, and he was like, so where are you coming from? I was like, Victoria. He's like, what are you doing there? I was like, we just went there for the 2 days just to go see friends. And he's like, huh? And so remember, my passport says birthplace Somalia, right? He's like, where are you from? I was like, well, I live in Eugene, but my parents live in Minneapolis. And he's like, where did you go to school? You know, he kept asking me about 5-7 questions, and he would ask every other one 2 to 3 times just to see if I was gonna give him a wrong answer. Just to see, he's like, where'd you go to college? I'm like, University of Minnesota. He's like, what do you do now? I'm a professional runner. He's like, where'd you go? It was kind of like he was setting a trap just to see if I was like just a reason to like detain me for whatever. And Charles and Haroon was like behind me, are gone by now. They're waiting outside, and they're like, what happened? And I was like, I'll tell you in the car, and we got to get out of here. So it was like another situation of where it was like, oh, because I was born a country, it was just like, boom, come here. And it goes back to the same situation though. That's what it's like being black here. It's that in America, it's just like you look like that. It doesn't even matter how many degrees you got. It don't matter where is your back. They don't care. It's just you look like this, you must be this. Same guy was like, you're born in Somalia, you must be terrorist. We gotta talk to you. We can't let you in. So it's like the situations are like similar. You know what I'm saying? In the sense, you just just looking at the top. They don't care what's in. What's under that. It's just like that looks like that. Grab him. Grab her.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And yeah, it's all in a lot of ways things even outside of your control, right? Like I can't control where I was born. You can't control where you were born. And
yeah, he was like, when was the last time you went there? I was like, 20 years ago. And he's like, okay. But at the same time, he's like, well, where were you last year? I was like, what? Because he could see the stamps on my passport. And I was like, well, I'm a professional athlete. I travel a lot, like. He's like, when's the last time you went to Somalia? I just told you like 20 years ago. What do you know what I'm saying? But it's like, but you can't get hostile with it too, because then there you go, boom. That's all they need is for you to give them any reason. And I saw an interview not too long ago. Toni Morrison, she's like a activist, artist, author. She's English, black English lady, very smart. And she did an interview with Charlie Rose, I believe, and he asked her about the idea of being black and also being like the victim, and she said something that stuck on my head, and it was that she said that as long as I have, and she's like, as long as I have some control of the situation, I would never ever let someone know that I'm the victim or let them see me as the victim. She's like, I would never be the victim, because by me becoming a victim, then they succeed. And it's the idea is that it don't matter what the situation is for me, whether I get pulled over, whether someone is, for any unstable mental or for whatever reason, someone is trying to target me and trying to get something out of me, just so they can have a reason to, you know, violate me or physically, mentally, for whatever reason, right? I always just tell myself, never, never, ever, if I can control the situation to the point where like they don't get the satisfaction of them having that power, seeing me as a victim, then I won. So you can pull me over as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you can ask me as many questions as you want. But if I can go home, because it's not worth for me to argue with you and you take my life. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, like, and you can do life in prison, but you can't give me my life back. So for me, when I'm out there, and most of the time when I'm by myself and I get in a situation, I just, say, hey, I'm not gonna be the victim, but I'm gonna do what I got to do to go home. And if I go home safe, I'm winning.
Well, Hassan, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us and kind of giving us insight into your world and what it's been like growing up, in Somalia, in America, and through your travels. I think, our hope is having you on and sharing these stories helps open people's eyes and ears to, just the realities out there for Black men and women and for people of color. It's, again, I'll go back to what we talked about earlier. It's not enough, I think, at this point to just recognize it. Now it's the time where you got to recognize it, and you have to be able to stand up when you see something happening that's not right. And so I really do want to say thank you for coming on and being comfortable sharing with us, and our hope is that it helps other people feel empowered to take those steps, to not just recognize, but to also start standing up. So I really do appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys having me, and I think it's easy to overlook some things, because you can never see someone. You'd be like, oh man, I never knew someone who looks healthy or like came up like that has gone through so much. And I think there's a lot of people and I think it's just people, you might not every day see the struggle, but like you don't know what people are going through. And I think that's why we got to talk about it, because I think like you 100% of the time or 99% of the time, you can't just see the struggle through someone, but you got to talk about it, get to know that person, understand that person, where they're coming from. So and I had a lot of friends that have been reaching out to me and regarding and just to see if I'm okay, and I'm like, I'm all right. I appreciate you guys reaching out, but you guys are in shock. I'm not shocked. This shit's been happening. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the rest of the world all of a sudden just realized, but so yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me here and let me tell my story, and also just appreciate you guys. So appreciate that love.
Cool. All right, Hassan. Well, be good. I hope the training keeps up well, and one of our other goals is to try to find a formidable opponent for you on the golf course. So we'll keep an eye out.
And you know it.
Alex, I think that was interesting conversation in a lot of different ways. I mean, one of the things that really stood out in all that Hassan was saying about his experiences here in the States, just hearing the difference in perspective as an athlete in high school between two sports that everyone knows so well, track and field and basketball, and just in the world of high school sports, how the reception for a Black athlete in America was so like drastically different. I mean, that was something I admittedly hadn't ever considered at thinking about athletes in high school sports.
Totally. Yeah, and I think my favorite moment from the pod is, one of your anecdotes of like, well, when he said, when you research a car and you start seeing it everywhere and attributing that to like us notice. I hope that is the instance now. I hope that it's always on our pulse, and like you said, we don't just notice it. We got to find a way to take action, and those actions are going to look different in different scenarios, but seek them out. You don't know what the action is, but you're going to have more conversations to figure out how to fix that conversation and not just notice it. The other thing I wanted to say, Hassan mentioned, like, you don't know people's struggle. I mean, I think it's easy to be like, wow, Hassan is like, he's such a nice guy and he's such a success story, but like, yeah, that's almost not a facade, but like, you don't know what everybody's gone through. And you can't make an assumption that somebody hasn't gone through this filter throughout their lives. So I think it's important for us to always have that sensitivity for everyone, not just on racial topics, but just a respect for everyone's background, and always have that top of mind. And speaking of making things top of mind, we call this show Beneath the Grandstand, and these are the conversations that happen beneath the grandstand. But I think for all intents and purposes this week, this is something that we need to bring forward. It needs to be out in the open. It needs to be called out. And especially if you see it in our sport, if you see any person or league or office or anybody in a position of power who has any sort of perceptions that you notice, this is the time to call it out. Let's move those people out of our sport, take them out of positions of power, and continue to push our sport forward and make it a bastion of accessibility for everyone. So we appreciate you guys joining us this week. We hope to continue this conversation moving forward, because this isn't just a trend in June. We're gonna keep talking about it because it's important to our sport and the people in it. So until next week, thanks guys. We'll see you. We'll see you in front of the grandstand.